So we've only got 15 minutes, and I know that the three of us could talk at length about VR. So let's dive in and find out a little bit, first of all, about how long both of you have been working in VR and what trends and what changes you've seen in that area during that time. We'll start with you, Leen.
So I started my company in 2016 because I fell in love with the medium. I had butterflies and I was like, okay, this is something I want to focus on. I have a technology background, so I was working in online video before, and I naturally saw the change to 3D video, basically. So the company was focused and still is focused on the distribution of 360 content and VR content, but naturally with the standard that we focus on changing to augmented reality, the business has changed as well. So today we're focusing on distributing as well VR as AR content via the browser.
Excellent. And over to you, Susanne. Tell us about your background.
Well, I started diving into virtual reality and 360-degree video when I was working at Die Welt from Axel Springer in 2015. And then me and my colleague Martin, with whom I founded IntoVR later on, we thought that there's much more that we can do with this special kind of media to tell really compelling stories. So we decided to found IntoVR in 2016, and yeah, it was really like a rush in the first years, like this hype, and now we are pretty happy that we can really get into work.
Excellent. So you've seen some changes in, because I think what it is about virtual reality is people have heard of it, they may have even experienced it. I work as a technology journalist in the UK, and I'm always amazed at how many people I come into contact with that have never experienced virtual reality or don't think that they've experienced virtual reality, which we can talk about in just a moment. But how accessible do you think it is to people? And if it's not right now, what are the reasons behind that? We'll start with you, Leen.
I guess comparing to 2016 and 2017, a lot has already changed and improved, but there's definitely still the fragmentation of the devices, for example. The headsets are not accessible enough. So the headsets used to have a price point for a total setup, for example, 2,000 euros, including the laptop. Now you have headsets, so standalone devices coming to the market at a price point of 200 euros, so like the Oculus Go, or the Quest, who's going to be announced, who's going to be launched in a couple of months at $400. So there's a lot of democratization necessary on the level of content creation, and Susanne can definitely support that, for example, with how to build VR. But on the level of distribution, there's also many questions to resolve. But I think if you compare the trends and how the market has evolved, it's definitely positive, and devices are becoming more mainstream.
No, yeah, totally agree with that. Any thoughts that you'd like to share on that one, Susanne?
Yeah, well, of course, if you talk about 360-degree video, which is like a branch of VR, if you want to say so, that is pretty easy to access because you can as well watch it on mobile or on desktop. Although that's not really like the virtual, this immersive experience that everyone wants to have, actually. So this is much more easy to access. That was as well a reason why we said that we want to focus for now on 360 video and not on virtual reality, because like for the real virtual reality you always need this big computer with lots of power, so not many people have that so far, but we are pretty optimistic that it's rapidly changing.
Moving forward, you see more and more of it, don't you? Sort of even scrolling through Facebook and the like, people are starting to upload holiday videos, for example, or images in 360, so it's certainly becoming more accessible. People feel more comfortable with it, don't they? Okay, let's talk about some of the areas that you use. We keep saying VR, but VR and AR, so augmented reality, in your everyday lives, because I think we had a little chat earlier before we came on stage, I think sometimes people don't actually realise that they're using it, do they? So talk us through some of the places that might take place and how you actually use it in your everyday life.
I guess there's a big distinction between VR and AR. We see VR mostly used for remote needs, so recruitment, training, when you're not able to be at the factory, for example. And then as opposed to AR, where the need is more at a specific location, how to build on top of the environment that you are. So for example, for AR, we see use cases in wayfinding, finding your way from point A to B inside a navigation. There's also definitely a use case for citizen participation, allowing them to, for example, preview a building or a square and having them vote or have a say in the conversation. For VR, on the other hand, like I said, more remotely, but there I still see a huge use case in cinematic and use reporting, tours, visits, cultural heritage. So there are so many, and we see that so many are moving from the prototype level to an actual building product. So it's not happening, it's not only happening in the proof of concept stages.
Yeah, it's definitely becoming something that people use more, and like we touched upon, perhaps not actually, no, things like Snapchat as well, we spoke about earlier, is a use of AR that people use all the time, yet they may say to you that it's not something that they're familiar with. And what would you say, what areas in your everyday life, when are you using VR and AR? Give us some examples of
well, of course, for journalistic purposes, you can do travel reports, which are really great. Of course, you can do war reports. You can, show the perspective of someone else much better than with other kind of media. But we work as well for institutions, like for museums or schools, or in the educational. In an educational level, for example, and where it is really useful as well as, of course, fundraising. We work as, for example, for Boot für die Welt, which is a German, from the church organization. So they are getting the people who are spending money on their projects, they take them to the project areas that way. So that's a really great tool, for example, for all those purposes. Educational level, for example, we created a story where you are a prisoner from the former GDR, prisoner from the Stasi, so you really get to know how it was at that time on a different level than you can so far.
By immersing people in it, essentially, isn't it? Now, I'm just aware of time. I can't actually see a time count here, so maybe somebody will give us a cue at some point, and I know that we've got loads we could cover off, and ultimately we need to get to the future of VR. But before we do, I know that you're both working on a joint project at the moment. I found it fascinating. It's the first time you've actually met, which is amazing. So tell us a little bit about that.
So basically, we're a pure technology company, and I think where VR and AR is today is that it's necessary that companies collaborate. So we're not at all focused on content creation, storytelling. They are. So we're finding collaborations across Europe to see people that are focused on this unique voice, this unique way of storytelling, to combine that with the technology that we're advocating. So what we're developing together is a personalized story, a personalized travel story to Cuba. So it's actually Cuba in 360, where you as a traveler have all the tools to make your own decisions as what you want to visit. So in each scene, each 360 scene basically, you have 4 options, and you can define yourself how you want to visit the island. What is interesting about what we're doing, it's web VR, basically meaning that it's available on the smartphone, on a desktop, and the browser of a headset. As well, we're introducing real-time tracking, which means that your travel experience could be completely different than hers. And in real time, you will have an overview of the island to see which parts of the island you already have visited, so you don't get lost and you don't visit the same destinations, basically.
Excellent. So as you said, I think one of the key things as well, because we will talk about the future, because obviously we want to get that, is collaboration with different people, different skill sets, combining your skill set in 360 video and what you've done before. I think it's really fascinating. So let's jump right ahead then. Where will VR be in the future, say 5, 10, even 20 years from now? What do you think virtual reality will look like, and how do you think we'll overcome the barriers that we currently have that are stopping us right now from being there?
Well, it's always hard to tell how the future will really look like because, well, everyone is like, oh, if you look back in a few years back and then think about how people imagined the future nowadays, it's completely different. So, well, maybe we will have in about 20 years the holodeck from Star Trek. That would be amazing. But I'm not sure about that, and that will be possible. Anyway, I do think that the gear, the headsets, will be far more accessible than they are today, far more easy to use, and not as clumsy as they are so far.
And as you mentioned as well, price point, because they are out of reach for your average consumer right now. I don't think there's many people who are just impulse purchasing one of these, for example. So do you think we'll see the price point come down to something that everybody can afford?
It depends on what you're talking about. If you talk about a headset like Oculus Go, I think that's okay for the price. Like that's affordable. If you compare it to, of course, like really big VR headsets, you as well. You don't. It's not only the prices as well. The space that you need.
Of course,
you need like lots of space, and everyone knows that here in Berlin, for example, we have got a bit of a rental crisis, so not enough space for everyone. It's difficult to rent something. So having enough space to do that is actually as well crucial.
Yeah. And what about yourself? Where do you think the future of VR will take us?
First of all, I think in the future we will not make the distinction between VR and AR. I truly believe we're talking about spatial computing and immersive technologies more than making distinction between both. Although today it's completely understandable, there are two different technologies, but in the end, I think from a consumer perspective and even from an enterprise perspective, we'll just say it's immersive. You already have mixed reality solutions where you see your own hand or you see your own gestures into the virtual space, so it will be very difficult to keep on making that distinction going forward. Also, I don't think that VR and AR on itself will get there. It will be powered by 5G. It will be powered by artificial intelligence. Actually, the collaboration that we're doing, the real-time tracking, is a bit of artificial intelligence, so you can define patterns. So those technologies are going to definitely influence the speed at which VR and AR will come to market, and it will go hand in hand, and that's why I also think there's a powerful future. The biggest reason why I'm such a big advocate is that VR and AR is actually a new level of data that becomes available. Every time you turn your head or move the camera, there's a new data point. And everyone knows when there's new data available, that is undeniably going to be a business opportunity. So there's much more ahead of us than there has been.
Obviously, it's fascinating and very exciting to think where we might be in the future. I want to talk as well, I believe that you're involved in a European initiative which is presumably going to help us move forward in the area of VR and AR and mixed reality, as you said. Tell us more about that.
So yes, the project is called XR for All, and it's a H2020 funded program. The European Commission understands that already today there's a huge competition coming from the East and the West. You already see it, for example, in the headsets. They're not from Europe. So they see there's definitely still an opportunity for Europe to accelerate, but they don't understand today, or they feel there's a bridge between where they are, providing guidelines on data protection and ethics, and where the community is. So XR for All has this objective to bridge the gap between them and also support entrepreneurs. So there are going to be 1.5 million made available via an open call in June, where everyone can participate and have some parts of their technology funded by the European Commission. It's not going to be a lengthy process like with other procedures, but it's going to be very accessible, so they actually see what surfaces up in terms of technologies, verticals, innovations across Europe. Most of all, they want to see the entrepreneurs behind the technology.
Excellent. And when will this all start, and when will that funding be available?
The website is already there, but it's just a landing page. The open call is going to be announced in June, and the open call will be available for the next 30 months.
It's incredible, though, like we said, we've spoken about some of the ways in which we are going to make it forward, but it's incredible now that it's being recognised as a medium in itself, and that there's money being pumped into it, because it is so important, and it is, as we've touched upon throughout the day, but particularly in this session, about how it's going to change certain areas. If I come to you, we talked a lot about, in your introduction to yourself, about you're a 360 journalist. So how do you think 360 video and VR is going to change journalism? We touched upon it a little bit. Obviously, you can give the whole experience, but that obviously brings with it its own issues, so to speak. Normally, when you do a news report, you're very in control about what people see, what they hear, what they feel. Tell me how 360 video fits into that.
Well, it's just one more medium, one more way of storytelling. So it's not that everyone has to do virtual reality journalism, and to tell. It's really not suitable for every kind of story. But it is very suitable for stories where you want to show the perspective of someone else to other people, and to tell to have this walk into another person's shoes. So that's really helpful for that. And of course, we always have to be very careful how we use it, because we should not raise emotions or too many emotions. Like, people should not be overwhelmed by their emotions when they use it. But it's very fascinating to find out the ways of storytelling, how you can really use that medium to tell a good story. And what is very interesting, especially for journalists, but for many other people as well, is like when you have normal kind of media storytelling, you always have this problem that people have to stay tuned to your content, that they're not scrolling and that they just read the first sentences and then they're away. That doesn't happen with virtual reality, because people, they just dive into the story and they look the whole thing, and then they come out of it and start to communicate, and that's what's very fascinating for us.
It is. I find the whole thing fascinating. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I knew this would happen. I've got loads more that I could talk to you about. Thank you very much for your input. I think what we can conclude is that the future of virtual reality is very exciting indeed. Thank you very much for your input. Please join me in a round of applause for our two panellists today.